Ross Hunt, pollster and principal of Hunt Research. Thank you so much and welcome back to Eye on Politics.
Thanks for having me, Jack. It's always a pleasure.
Likewise. So here we are, everybody's talking about this State Senate District 9 race, the big upset, Democrat Taylor Rehmet trouncing Republican Leigh Wambsganss, and people want to know, how did this Democrat win in a very solidly red district?
It's a great question. A lot of people are talking about turnout in this race, and both on the left and the right. You have Democrats who are pounding their chests and celebrating a wave of blue turnout that they think this presages that will sweep across all of Texas. On the right, you have Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick saying if Republicans don't turn out, we could face the same thing in the fall. Now, turnout in this election was relatively low, as it often is in special elections and especially in runoffs. And Republicans did underperform relative to their turnout in the last general election, in 2025 in November. But Democrats didn't turn out massively. Only 26% of the Democratic base voted. Republicans, about 23% of the Republican base voted. Republicans didn't lose this seat because of low turnout, and Democrats didn't win it because of high turnout. The Democrat won this seat because almost all of the independent voters who voted in this election, and some of the Republican voters, voted for the Democrat. And that is the big warning sign for Republican candidates for this fall. Turnout is important, but candidate quality is also extremely important as well.
And so, Wambsganss says this is a wake-up call, Republicans stayed home. Too many Republicans stayed home. Is she right about that?
I don't think she's quite right about that. You can never have too much Republican turnout. And we did see a dip in Republican turnout from the first round of this special election in November. In the first round, Republicans and Democrats turned out in equal percentages. And we had two Republican candidates on the ballot then, Mrs. Wambsganss, and then also a candidate named John Huffman. And it could be that many of the voters who came out to vote for Huffman did not come out. Huffman himself, in a recent statement, said that there had been no effort to reach out to the 19,000 voters who had voted for him. And so he could be in a situation where a certain group of voters, I think especially independent voters who are not part of the party base, but do tend to vote Republican in fall elections, some of those conservative independents failed to turn out. But turnout is not the main reason that we had 57% of people voting for the Democrat in this district, because it was 57% vote for the Democrat in an election in which, at the end of the day, 50 to 52% of the votes cast were cast by the Republican base. So the electorate was 52% Republican to about 36% Democrat. And yet the Democrat is winning 57-43. So you do the math. There were a lot of Republican and independent votes going to Rehmet.
And why is that?
I think it has a lot to do with the candidate not quite matching the district. So this district, Senate District 9 in Tarrant County, is 51% Fort Worth. 51% of registered voters are in Fort Worth. And it's a district which has a large number of working class and middle class voters. In this district, the Republicans' handpicked candidate was from Southlake, the wealthy suburb at the northeastern end of the district, which represents just 4% of the registered voters. And she's an activist who has focused very successfully, but in her career has focused largely on culture war issues and social issues. And so we just had a very poor match between the ethos of the candidate and the nature of the district in this instance. So there is a strong cautionary tale here for Republicans for the fall. In a midterm election, in which we do not have the president at the top of the ticket driving turnout, it is crucially important that Republicans recruit and support candidates who are high quality and match the ethos of their district very closely, or they're going to see a large number of independents and maybe even some of the Republican base turn against them.
So have you looked at the precinct maps on how all the precincts voted? Were there any surprises?
Not all of the precinct data is available yet from this second round of the election. I did a very deep dive into the first round, and even then, especially looking at the Fort Worth side of the district, you could see from the vote share that Rehmet, the Democrat, was getting in many Fort Worth areas, that it was mathematically impossible for him to have won this many votes without about a quarter of the Republicans, if not more, in those areas supporting him, along with most of the independents. Now, a lot of people are trying to extrapolate this to the national level and to say either this represents a rejection of the president and his policies, or that it's something which will be duplicated across districts in the fall. I do not think that either of those conclusions is warranted.
Why not?
Well, if you look at the two candidates who are running, if you look past the policies and what the candidates would actually probably do in office, the Democrat looks almost a little more Trumpy than the Republican does. He presented himself as a working class candidate. And so we don't have a rejection necessarily of a Trump ethos here. The president's own comment on this was to say, essentially, when I'm not on the ballot, anything can happen, which may sound a little self-aggrandizing, but I think it is true in this instance. We have a lot of conservative independents who felt like they could vote for whomever in this race, and they chose not to vote for the Republican.
And let me ask you about, you mentioned a little bit before, but the Tarrant County Democratic Party chair is predicting, she told me she thinks this is a clear indication that there is going to be a blue wave in Tarrant County like we saw in Dallas County back in 2006, and they're going to flip countywide seats, they're going to flip some state house seats. You're shaking your head no.
No, I saw that, and I think she or someone else in the Democratic Party said this is a pattern. This election is a pattern. I mean, a single data point is never a pattern. I would say if you have 2 data points, maybe you can make an unreasonable extrapolation, but there's not a pattern from 1 data point. This election, again, the turnout pattern does not indicate that Democrats have a surge of enthusiasm. Frankly, in an off-year election, I would expect the party out of power to turn out at a much higher rate than they did. We had James Tallarico, Jasmine Crockett, Joaquin Castro, everybody under the sun was urging every registered voter, Democratic voter in this district to turn out. And at the end of the day, there were tens of thousands, I think 70, 80,000 Democrats stayed home in this district.
But on the flip side, you had President Trump on Truth Social, you had Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor, Tim O'Hara, the county judge, they were all out there.
Right, no one turned out great. But we've seen elections in the past where you do see waves of Dem turnout, where you have Democrats outperforming Republican turnout by 10, 15, 20 points. We did not see that in the special election. The Democratic base turned out just a tiny bit better than you would expect. And there's a reason for that I think actually does carry over to the rest of the country, which is that the Democratic brand is still badly damaged. We have a situation now where even though the Republicans are out of power, or in power, and you would expect them to become less popular as the pendulum sort of swings back in the other direction, the Democratic Party is still far less popular than the Republican Party nationally. Their brand is too damaged by the positions their presidential candidate took in 2024, by concerns about immigration. And so they're in a position where it's difficult for them to generate a lot of enthusiasm from their base and difficult to capitalize on the position they're in. So there's not a turnout advantage. Now on the persuasion side of things, I don't think you can extrapolate this election to the whole of even Tarrant County for the reason that I already mentioned, which is just that we have here a case of a real mismatch between the candidate who was running and the district in which they were running, which will not be the case in many of the districts in Tarrant County and around the state.
And I wanted to ask you about what the Republican Party chair in Tarrant County said. He said, look, this is going to be a different election, and Wambsganss said it in her statement. This is going to be a different election in November. We're going to have many more Republicans out there. Many more are obviously on the ballot, and Wambsganss is going to win this. How can they be so sure that the die isn't cast?
I don't think they can be completely sure, and I do think it is concerning that many of the strategists who were in charge of this effort were very bullish about Wambsganss's chances coming into this runoff. So I think caution is warranted, and I think the Republicans should run scared in this district. But I think they'll run scared and they'll win. And my own analysis of the independents who voted suggests that the independents who turned out in this runoff were already independent voters who leaned much farther to the left than the projected electorate for the fall. So I think this electorate was like 13 to 15% more Democratic. The independents were 13 to 15% more Democratic than the independents we expect to turn out in the fall. Now, those are just projections, but I do think that Wambsganss should be in a strong position to win this district in the fall. It is definitely a warning sign, though, for other much closer districts all around the state.
Last question. Can what happened here impact the U.S. Senate race, the Republican primary? And if so, how?
That, as many things, is up to President Trump. And he did say something very interesting about that the other day. For months, he has been demurring on the issue of whether he would endorse the U.S. Senate race. And it even got to the point where Attorney General Paxton's campaign has started to make fun of Senator Cornyn for saying continuously he was going to get the Trump endorsement and not securing it. But the joke may ultimately be on Attorney General Paxton, because yesterday President Trump said, I may reconsider about whether or not I will endorse the U.S. Senate race. Because of the results of this Texas state Senate race, I think the president is looking at the U.S. Senate race, and he prizes loyalty, and so he's inclined to let the race play itself out because Paxton has been loyal to him. He wants to give him a shot. But he also he doesn't want to lose a U.S. Senate seat on his watch.
In Texas.
In Texas. And he's probably been looking at the same polling that we've all seen that suggests that Senator Cornyn would be a much stronger stronger Republican candidate against either of the Democratic challengers
in the general election
than would General Paxton in the general election. So President Trump, as always, is not being completely clear about what he will do. But if he were to choose to endorse Senator Cornyn in the Senate primary, then that would be one of the largest effects that this state Senate race would have, because that would significantly boost Senator Cornyn's chances in both the primary and the subsequent runoff election, and really change the map in the general election as well.
You would tie the president's decision, if he does endorse before March 3rd, back to the results of the state Senate election?
Yeah, that's what he said in his announcement. He said, thinking about the state Senate race, if I recall correctly, that he may reconsider. And things might be worse than he thinks, and so he may want to hedge his bets and select someone who will have a good chance in the fall. That's certainly what the senator's campaign is hoping for. And if that transpires, that will be a really dramatic change to the electoral landscape for the fall.
Ross Hunt of Hunt Research, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jack.
We appreciate it.
My pleasure.